Welcome back to the Disc Dog Podcast. I'm your host, Kirby McIlveen, and this is my co-host,
Jeff Hill.
Jinx Yobi Soda. And today our topic is about judging, and specifically freestyle judging. We're really not going to talk about judging any of the other games or toss and fetch or anything like that. This is pretty much going to be all freestyle-based judging. And this is particularly relevant because I just came back from Korea about a month or two ago, and I was one of the judges for the KDDN event, which is the Korean Disc Dog Nationals. That's like one of their big events in Korea, and their qualifier for USDBN. So that event was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed watching all the competitors. One of the things I really enjoyed about the Korean disc dog teams was there was a lot of movement from the handlers, and they had a lot of unique flash and style and flair. And it was something kind of different than what I've seen in the US and in Europe, and different regions have their different styles. So it's always a treat for me to go judge when I'm going internationally, because I get to see a whole different world of disc dogging. So that's always a joy.
And another thing is different judges are also looking for different things, which we'll be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so not only different styles in different areas, but different judges want to see different things. There's just different things that they like.
Absolutely. That's a really great point. And I think something to mention before we get into this is that, we both have somewhat limited experience judging. We've judged quite a bit, but maybe not as much as some of the, older players that have been doing it longer, maybe have had more lulls between dogs. They've had a chance to judge. Most of our competition career has been competing, a lot of it. Am I right?
Right.
You've kind of mostly done the competing side of a disc, and
Right.
not quite. You've done a bit of judging, but not quite as much judging.
Yeah, I'd say towards the beginning of my career, I actually did a lot more judging before I got really serious and had to just basically spend more time on me and my routines and worry about my freestyle rather than being at events and judging. But I did probably judge somewhere around 25 or 30, I would say, is probably what I did. For about 10 years, I was doing 2 or 3 every year. And
those were all locally, right?
Those were
SoCal,
local, Southwest U.S.
Yeah, Arizona, Nevada,
right,
kind of thing.
So usually about 2 locally here in California, and then 1 or 2 in other states. And so, yeah, I did probably at least 30 events. But then in the past more like 10 years, I've done very little judging because, like I said, I've been focusing on my dogs. But this year, I do have a major judge. I will be judging a major event this year. I'm not going to spill the beans on exactly what it is, but I am going to be at a major event. One of the biggest, probably the biggest.
Well, now you're going to give it away.
Well,
so anyway, yeah, my judging experience has been a little bit different. I haven't judged quite as many and not as much locally. I've judged several times in Colorado. I haven't really judged that much in the US, but I've judged outside of the US, in China. So kind of gone around and done some international things, Mexico, recently South Korea, like I just said. So, my experience judging is a little bit different. It's been a little bit less, but much different styles than what I normally see here in the US.
And bigger events, you've done more bigger events than I have.
Yeah. Mostly usually when I travel to do an event, and I think this is the case for most judges, is that when you're traveling to do an event, it's something big. It's usually a big qualifier or some kind of, high stakes event. So, yeah. So to kind of get into it, maybe we should just talk about the basics of the categories. And, for somebody that doesn't really know how freestyle is judged at all, where do we start?
Well, most of the organizations have 4 categories. And while there are differences between the organizations and what the categories are, there's definitely a lot of crossover as well. We typically have a human category, which is going to be focused on basically the throwing for the most part. But there's going to be a dog category that's going to be focused on the dog's athleticism and their abilities. And then there will be a team, some sort of team or a comprehensive category, which is, those are more like overall types of categories. And then catch ratio is something that is calculated in all of the organizations, but not necessarily directly included in your score. but it's super, super important. So most of the times on the judging panel, you're going to have someone calculating catch ratio. So that's like 5 sort of different categories, because between a team and comprehensive or overall, that's kind of 2 different categories, but could
Sometimes
be
they're the same.
similar.
It sort of
Sometimes they're the
depends
same.
on the
Mm-hmm.
organization. Uh, you know, and in general, those are really the categories. So those are kind of the things that the judges are looking for, looking at, and evaluating. And as a player, from the player side, I think it's really difficult to go through and try to nitpick each organization's rules. It's better to evaluate your own routine just on your dog, your handler, your team, and
Right.
your success catch ratio kind of overall area,
Right.
instead of trying to pick one and like, I don't know, nitpick a certain category. Like wow factor, for example, would be like an odd one to sort of
Right.
nitpick. Sure, you want to have that type of thing, but not necessarily focus your whole thing around a particular category.
Yes, and
That makes
and
sense.
and and in an organization like USDDN, they have very specific things that they want to see. And then you have something like Skyhounds that is more generalized or almost vague, and they do that intentionally because they want the judge to kind of make their decision on how they want to judge the category. And they have just very simple information on what they want to see, but they've actually publicly stated that they want their judges to have their own control and say over how they judge the category. So there's going to be a huge range like that, and to talk about every single one of the organizations and all the different categories specifically, or try to gear your routine towards all of those different categories is extremely difficult. So it's better just to think of you, your dog, how you play together, and your catch ratio.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I did want to add, we're not here to say that one particular way is right or wrong to judge. I think it's really great that we live in a time that we've got so many different organizations with different options and different ways to evaluate a routine, because really at the end of the day, what is, a great disc dog routine? What is the best routine? I mean, if we want to get sappy about it, it's the one that the dog and handler enjoys most together. But as far as the actual numbers on the score sheet goes, I mean, it could be highly dependent on what the judge sees. And to your point about Skyhounds, I think something worth noting with these judging systems that leave things more open, like Skyhounds, I think AWI and UFO are a little more open. USCDN is a little bit more particular about they want a certain number for a specific piece of the routine. But leaving it open in some ways leaves it a little bit more timeless because the sport is growing over time. So one of the big examples that I would say is like flow. So that's a newer concept, I think, to the disc dog freestyle world. Well, granted, now we're in 2025, so it's kind of old news now. But 10, 15 years ago, flow was kind of like, hey, now your routine has to have flow. If you watch freestyle routines from back in the 80s and 90s, they had some flow, but not the kind of flow that you see today. There was a lot more pause, a lot more setup, make sure everything's perfect and, don't rush through everything. Whereas now we've kind of swung a little bit more towards everything really needs to flow together. And that's just part of the evolution of the sport. And leaving it open means that you don't necessarily have to dictate the changes by the rules. It's really based on the knowledge of the judge, which makes it important to have a really, you know, intelligent judge, somebody that's paying attention and that knows what they're looking at. Whereas USCDN kind of says, hey, even if you don't really know what you're looking at, this is what you need to look for. So there's just a little more guidance. Like I said, neither one's right or wrong, just, point to think about.
Right. And I've seen or know of judges that even think in sort of that older mindset a little bit. And again, there's nothing wrong with that because the judge wants to see what they want to see. And some of them want to see a very deliberate setup for your sequences. And they're not as interested in how the sequences are all tied together and that the whole thing flows well. I had one judge it actually wasn't directed to me, it was to somebody else. When I was in the conversation, this judge who had been around for a long time said that they want your sequences to look like sequences. They don't want it to look like one routine. They want to see blocks. They want to see this sequence, and they want to be standalone. So they're totally fine if you're picking up your discs and your dog's just standing there waiting for you. That's not something that bothers them very much. They want to see that. They want to see you be very deliberate that, okay, now I'm going into my sequence, and it makes it in such a way that's that they understand it and they like. So everybody's different.
Yeah, it is different. And I think we may bring this up a little bit later in the episode too, is just, it really kind of people's perspective depends on, their point in time when they started, how they learned to play themselves, certain things that were brought up of importance to them. Maybe there was something that they were doing when they were competing that somebody told them to improve, and that really made a big impact on them. And so therefore, when they judge, that's something they really key in on. And it's a big focus to them, which maybe for another judge, it might not be such a big focus. So, I know like a lot of our judges locally tend to really value high quality throws, which we've been to places that they don't really value the high quality throws, that they really don't care what you're doing. If it's wobbly, it doesn't matter. They just want, the dog to catch it. They don't care. But our judges are kind of like, yeah, well, your dog caught it, but it wasn't, spinning and, ripping and looked crazy. And, it wasn't crisp. So, in Southern California, that's just a regional difference that we will kind of get not in trouble, but, our scores won't look as nice if the throws are not perfect, even if our dog was, making sure everything was caught. So kind of to get back into the specific categories themselves, we could start with kind of the human category and maybe go over, what it is, what do judges look for, what are certain qualities that fall into the human category, and maybe say how this plays into the different organizations, because each organization really does have some sort of handler category.
Right. So for me, in my opinion, when you think of the handler category, I believe it's almost exclusively your throws, because that's what you're doing as the human side of the team. Your job is to throw the disc. There are other parts of it. It could be things like how well you move around the field, how you present yourself, and things like that. But for the most part, the overwhelming portion of the category is your throws. And for me, there's three basic types of throws or things that we're looking for in terms of throws. And number one is throw quality, which is what you were just talking about. Throw quality is how nice the throw is, not what type of throw you're doing or anything like that. It is how nice is the specific throw. Does it look nice? Does it look beautiful going down the field? And depending on if it's headwind, tailwind, do you basically make it look like there's no wind out there? Is your disc spinning like crazy with no wobble and very consistent, that every time you do these throws, you always see them look a certain way? They always look a certain way. Every time this person does their throws, they're very consistent. Doesn't matter what direction you're throwing, how far you're throwing, they always look the same.
I think one kind of good way that I think about this, just, if you're newer or aren't sure, when the disc is thrown and you're not sure, the dog's going after it, does it look like 100% chance that the dog's going to catch it?
Right.
That probably means it's a pretty darn good throw.
Right.
Because if it's kind of going off to the side, you're like, ooh, that's 50-50. I don't know, the dog might not catch it. Yes, right. It's great if the dog does, but and sure, the dog looks great when they catch it, but it's like, okay, well, the throw quality wasn't quite there. But that's just kind of a good way to think about it in the very beginning is, does it look like it's a pretty sure chance the dog's going to catch it?
And I usually know as soon as it comes out of my hand, I know if it's a good throw and if my dog's going to catch it, generally. If I throw it and I'm thinking, I'm not sure, that's a bad throw in my mind. Even if it looked nice, in my mind, it wasn't a very good throw. Most likely, it's going to look different to the judges. They're going to say, well, what happened to Jeff's throw there? Well, what did he do there? It didn't look right to me. So the next most important probably thing would be the throw variation. And that is different types of throws. We're talking about the more standard throws. Overhands, forehand or sidearm,
Staker,
stakers and
thumber,
thumbers and scoobers
tomahawk,
and
scuba. And everybody's, just so you know, in case you're confused, uh, there's not really standardized terminology for the different throws. It seems to be kind of where, like, whoever you learn from, whatever they call the throw, that's usually how you learn it. So it tends to be regional. People sort of have different names. Some of them are pretty standard. I mean, overhand, backhand, forehand, sidearm is kind of standard.
Even overhand, I've heard it called a wrist flip.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Or a chicken wing. And I've even heard another one called a chicken wing. It just means your arm is back. Chicken wing. It's a totally different throw that if you do a backhand, sort of like some people call it a beach throw or a dad throw. You kind of bring your arm back and you go like this, and they'll call that a chicken wing as well. So
that's true. You know what? Good point. Honestly, quite honestly, like none of the throws are
backhand.
Are standards except for backhand. Everything else is kind of like a free for all in terms of the naming.
And some of them are so bad, like thumber. Well, that thumber just means you throw it with your thumb. I mean, geez, there's so many different versions.
I could think of 5 versions of throws that people call a thumber.
Right.
And then, God forbid somebody make up a new throw, and then who knows what they're calling it, right? So just keep that in mind if we were referencing any throws or anything, and you're like, what throw is that? You might already know it, but we just call it something different.
Yes.
But yeah, it's kind of funny because sometimes you can figure out who learned from who based on what they call the throw.
Right.
But another point I wanted to add to the throw variation is not only do you want to consider the grip of how you're holding the disc, but also the release. So where are you releasing the disc from? So that means it could be around the back, it could be under the leg, it could be between the legs. There's all different kinds of releases that you can do on top of the different grips. So that just really kind of creates infinite amount of options for throwing.
It goes crazy. I mean, something that's not an easy throw, like the forehand or sidearm, however you like to call it. I've even heard it called a 2-finger throw. But that's not an easy throw, but we have so many variations of that behind our back, which is extremely difficult. Very few people do that throw. Under the one leg, under the other leg. I do it also down on the ground through my legs. I don't know what you call
you could
that.
Do like the football hike where you throw
there's that
you.
way.
The flamingo.
The flamingo.
Where you wrap your arm around the back and throw it behind you. That's another
so there's easily 10 different ways you could throw it that are almost standard ways. And then you could probably come up with another 10 or 20 or unlimited ways that you can come up with variations yourself. And that's the thing. Come up with your own variations. Take these throws, think, I've never seen someone do this, and just try to come up with something different. And that's what judges like to see.
I think that gets the judge's attention too, because even if somebody's going out and doing a lot of variations, if it's all kind of the same thing that everybody's been doing for a while, if you bring out something a little unique and different that people haven't seen or haven't seen recently, it's like, whoa, it kind of catches your attention, where, kind of reminds the judges a little, kind of exclamation point in their head, like, oh, hey, whoa, they're making attempts at throw variation. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the hardest pieces of the handler part to judge is the variation of the throws, because sometimes it's very hard to see what people are doing with their hands. Sometimes throws are so quick, and especially if you're, rapid firing out, 1, 2, 3, 4 different throws all at once. It's like, whoa. It's sometimes a little bit hard to keep track of.
And then to pick up if you're left-handed throwing or right-handed throwing, you want to try to have both.
That's a whole other point. You want to talk about infinite amount of options, and there's a lot of judges that look for it, and some judges pay no attention to it if you're going to throw with both hands or not. Us being from SoCal and very harsh on the throwing here, so yeah, if you're not doing both hands, that's going to be one of the first judge feedbacks that you're going to get here.
And when I'm judging, I pick it up just like that when I see somebody switch hands, because I know how difficult it is to do that. And if I see them doing it, I'm going to give them extra credit for it.
Absolutely. I like to, I really key in onto it too. I think sometimes it's a little bit harder for me to notice. Like if I'm just watching routine as a casual watcher, I don't always necessarily see it right away. But if I'm judging, if I got my judge's hat on, then I'm definitely looking for that, because I appreciate that, because that's something that I do. And, kind of an example of how how we were brought up into the sport and how that affects our judging. That's something that we look for because that's so important. It was drilled into us. You need to use both hands. So, that's something that is a big value item in the Southern California region of play. But, sometimes it's difficult to see and this kind of goes for everything, but sometimes making things a little bit more obvious to the judge is helpful. So one really great example of this using the double-handed throws, I saw Marina, last name starts with F. I'm not even going to say it because I'm going to butcher it. She's from Italy. She's the 2024 UFO World Cup champion. She's fabulous. She has this trick, though, that really, it's like, it is so obvious that she's doing the both throws that, the judge has to be blind to not see it. So I love what she does where she has the forehand grip and she kind of comes around her body with one disc on each side, and she throws the one-handed forehand and then the same throw with the other hand a little bit longer, and the dog does like a short catch and a long catch. And I love this move because it shows her skills and it's really obvious and it just looks badass. It looks so good because it shows the dog skill. It shows that variation of left and right-handed throws, and it kind of puts it in your face like, hey, look, no, I can do it both hands.
Yeah, I really like that.
It's cool.
I did one like that real early on, but I just did backhands, and I wanted to make sure the judges would see it. And when I was asking people for feedback, I sent a video to a friend, and she said, oh, what I really liked was the salt and pepper. I'm like, salt and pepper? So see, everybody has a name for it. So whenever you do two throws like that, she called it salt and pepper. I'm like,
oh my gosh.
So
okay, that's actually that's a great name.
It actually is.
I'm gonna start using that for like the switching back and forth.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing, but it's like, Jesus, everybody has a different name for things. So we talked about throw quality and throw variation, and the other thing I like to add in is something I call trick throws, and those are things that are your grip doesn't necessarily matter a whole lot. You might do something really cool with it, but typically it's more the trick that you're doing. For example, an airbrush or a kick, or if you do a mac off your chest or a chest roll, those are tricks that you're doing with the disc, and I consider that a whole different category that just elevates your routine, and it takes it to something to show that you're not just out there playing with your dog, you're also playing with the disc, and you're doing something really special with it, and you're trying to, usually those tricks are very unique. A lot of people, they put their own, even if you've seen something similar, someone will put a spin on it and just keep, as the years go on, you're always just adding and changing something to all these tricks. And it could be things like where you use one disc as a dish and you spin the other disc inside of that one, and you can do a whole lot of things from it. You can brush it. I toss the disc underneath the one that you're not expecting to be thrown. You can drop the disc off and kick it. You could just have your dog grab the disc that's spinning.
There's infinite
so
possibilities
many things you can do. And
I got a new one I got to tell you about. We'll see. Maybe I will bring this trick out, but I've been working on it. It's quite cool. And it is definitely qualifies as a trick throw.
So this is just the category within the human category that just expands to whatever you can think of. Anything crazy. Just the cooler it is, the crazier it is, I think the better.
Okay, so I got a question, because I don't necessarily think of trick throws as a separate thing. I think of it as part of throw variation. For me, it's not really separate. It's kind of the same to me. And so when you say trick throws, do you think of, so for example, let's say I'm going to do like a little spin on a dish type toss and the dog goes over me, or I'm doing some type of like vaulting dog catch, over some sort of element like that, that's combined with another trick, not just the dog catching it. Would you call that would you kind of consider that under your umbrella of trick throw?
Yes.
Okay. And see, so I think in my mind, I kind of sum that in with throw variation, and that's just another way to achieve throw variation. And sometimes I'll use it as a standalone, like just, with Sora, I just do a straight up chest roll, or I might combine it with some other trick, like spinning the disc and popping it up and catching the dog, or just they catch it on their own and we don't do anything else with it.
And you could call it, also consider maybe advanced throws, like very advanced throws.
Okay.
But a lot of them aren't even throws. That's why I really just like to call them tricks or trick. throws. I don't know what
That's
other
true. They're
word to
not
use,
going more than like
because
5 yards.
some of them you're not even throwing. If I spin the disc on another one, when my dog grabs it or whatever, I didn't even throw it. I maybe threw it to get it there originally, but then it's just sitting there spinning. Or if I do a chest roll, I didn't really throw it either. It never even got airborne necessarily until it kind of rolled off of me. Or I could be holding my dog. Let's say I do a dog catch and then I got the disc in my hand and I roll it up my arm and my dog catches it while it's rolling on me. It never even takes flight.
Right.
So I just consider them tricks that are very, very advanced, very unique, not just the standard throws.
Okay.
I would say. Fair. And of course, there's gray areas too, because then what do you consider?
That was like exactly what I was thinking.
A skip behind your back or something like that.
Craziness. I mean, the things that people come up with anymore is wild. But I think that's also kind of a theme of this: is there is a lot of gray area. How do you really judge? Right. Freestyle, and what is, what makes it good or bad? And I think that's all just within the throwing area, right, of human. I mean, there's other aspects of the human piece too. I think, disc management and the field presentation are obviously, other ones that it's not necessarily about throwing, except when you really learn about it, it actually is about throwing and where the distances are and your plan to move around the field. So throwing plays a big part into it, but the element itself, just judging it, doesn't really have to do with throwing. Right. And so what is like a good disc management to you? What does somebody have to do to show good disc management in your opinion?
I think the most basic way to look at it is your dog's not standing there waiting for you while you're picking up discs. I think that sort of encapsulates it for me.
Okay. I like that.
Without being real specific about it.
Sure.
I think that is one of the big things. The other one is that if you do anything unique with your disc management, I do like to see that. I like to do it myself.
So what would you consider like unique?
Here's a great example. And there was a young kid, maybe about 12 years old, who actually asked me about this after my routine. I came off the field. He ran over to me. He said, was that intentional or did it just happen like that? And it was, I did a back vault. And as I'm doing the back vault, I'm picking up a disc. Oh, and okay. I said, oh, no, that's intentional. I said, that's amazing that you picked it up, because most judges won't even see that. It's a very difficult thing to pick up those details. And he said, that was so cool. And he loved that. So as I'm going down, I moved into a position where a disc was. So as I did my back vault, I picked up the disc all in one motion. So I threw my back vault throw, picked up my disc, and I'm on to the next throw.
Okay.
Or next trick or whatever. So that is like a perfect example of doing something kind of fancy or unique. Okay. Or if your dog jumps into your arms and you take the disc from them, or as they're going by you, or as an over, or if you do a flip and you take their disc from them before.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen and done these, like, I was inspired by a Japanese team. The dog's name was Steel. But anyway, he started like the first 30 seconds of his routine with one disc, and the whole thing was to show off the dog handing off the disc, but doing different tricks, and all flowed really nice. But it was really cool because he had like 4 or 5 different types of handoffs. Like the dog jumped over his leg, handed off. Then he did another trick and the dog handed it off at his feet. Then he did another trick and the dog handed it off on his back. Like he got a bunch of different things. So it was kind of cool because it showed a different way of disc management. It was obviously planned. It wasn't like he got stuck and like it was clunky and he had to just keep grabbing the disc for the dog. It was very well planned. But so that's like, in my opinion, that's kind of like a unique example of disc management. I think for me, I kind of have a rule, which rules are meant to be broken. So based on what your example was, you may disagree with this, but I kind of have a rule that I think if the dog is within like 5 feet of you, you should not be picking up the disc. The dog should be handing it to you. And because my thought is when an audience is watching, and I consider this when I'm judging, when the audience is watching, the view is on the dog. So imagine, like you've got a video camera on the dog and only the dog is in frame. And as a viewer, you're watching the dog the whole time. So once the handler comes into frame with the dog, I don't want to see the handler picking up discs. Now, if the dog hands it to them, that's more of a team type thing. The dog showing the skill of handing off the disc. So that could be intentional to show, hey, look, my dog can hand off the disc, because that is something that's very difficult to teach.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of how I think of like disc management. I don't want to see you picking up the disc when the dog is within your area.
Right. That's what I said. What did I?
Well, no, I was saying like your back vault. You're picking up the disc and the dog's right there, right?
Well, they're doing during the back vault.
Yes.
And I'm not slowing down.
Oh,
I'm
that's
not
a good
slowing
point.
down.
Okay.
I'm not slowing down to do it.
I'm
or
gonna have to go
anything
back
like
and look
that.
at old videos of this.
Yeah, I mean and I've done that also in other sequences as well. Like even in and around the world, I can go down to do a throw and then pick up a disc while I'm doing it around the world and then move to my next spot, because I don't do it around the world where I just stand in the center and do one of those. I like to move whenever I do my around the world. I just think it's more interesting than someone just sitting there and spinning.
I like, which kind of brings us to another point, is the field presentation and the handler's movement.
Right.
Just in general. So for me, field presentation kind of encompasses two sort of things. And field presentation is to move to different areas of the field. You're not just staying in like one zone. I mean, the fields are generally painted for toss and fetch. If you're standing in just one zone, that's usually not ideal. You want to try to move at least to 2 or 3, or if you're in an organization like USDDN that has 10 discs, which is like basically infinite amount of discs, you should be hitting all the corners. I mean, you should be able to go a long ways with 10 discs.
And so, throwing your discs in the different
directions. That's, yes, really good point. And then I think another part of field presentation that sort of ties into like team and sequence and flow is the movement within your sequences. So, it could be easy to kind of stand there and just, you're kind of standing like a tree in the middle and the dog's doing all these tricks around you. Like you said, it could be around the world, or it could be like a vault to another vault, or an over to a vault, but you're standing right there and there's no movement between each trick. It's not like I do a leg vault and then I kind of make a move and then go into a back vault or something like that. And this is kind of a little bit of a newer development, I think, in just our freestyle, is that people are moving within their sequences. Because I think it used to be, okay, the field presentation was a little bit novel, 5-10 years ago, I think. And it was like, oh, you need to, hit different zones of the field. Well, now I think kind of the newer trend is you need to be moving within the sequences. So that's becoming more and more important. And we're seeing more creative ways to do this. And that's kind of making stuff look fresh and new, because we've been doing back vaults and leg vaults and dog catches for the last, 35 years or something. Right. So, things kind of get stale. It's like, okay, let's add some new life into this. And, back vaults are not going to disappear anytime soon. So we need to find a way to, make it a little different.
Right. And doing setup moves in between all these tricks definitely helps those kinds of things. It brings more motion to your routine. That's one of the words I use a lot, is motion, and that's both of you. And you try to, even just doing little things like sending your dog through and then you turning and rotating, all of those things help. And then you're doing tricks facing different directions. And even if you're not running around all over the place, like I'm not able to really run at full speed like I used to be able to, I'm able to still at least turn and rotate and move a little bit.
There's an attempt.
Right. And sometimes I'm getting down lower for tricks, or I'm up higher and things like that. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think a common misconception, and I hear this a lot from kind of older generation players, is that, well, I can't do that. I can't do the things that some of these players in their 20s are doing, where they're rolling around, or, they're able to sprint down the field, or whatever crazy athleticism they're able to do. And it's not so much about that. There's a big difference in somebody that just stands there and somebody that takes a few steps. I mean, honestly, if you watch the videos back to back, I think just a couple steps or just an attempt at movement makes a huge difference. Absolutely. So you don't need to be, a champion gymnast or, like a parkour specialist or anything like that to do this, because we certainly aren't.
Right. If you feel like you're just standing there, that's how you look. If you feel like you're at least making an attempt to move around, then that's how it will look. It'll look like you are trying to move around. And if you do it fairly smooth, Like me in the last few years not being able to move as quickly as I'd like to, what I do is move smoothly. Whenever I do move, I'm moving, and it's a very fluid kind of motion, and it looks fairly natural. Not that like I'm not even trying; I'm just doing it, and me and my dog are just doing our thing, and that's better than nothing. I'm at least doing something.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. Like if somebody moves kind of clunky, where they're just like stop, go, it kind of draws a little bit of attention to it.
Yes.
But if you kind of ease into, okay, I'm going slow and then faster and then slow again,
Yes.
and you kind of ease into it, you're not really drawing attention to yourself in a bad way.
Right.
You kind of cover it. One of the things that I also sort of preach, if you've ever been to a seminar of mine or a lesson, I always kind of talk about you're the background dancer to your pop star dog, and your dog is really the superstar here. So you don't need to be Beyonce. That's your dog's job. They can be, the Taylor Swift or Ariana Grande. They're the star of the show. But all of those people have backup dancers that they're not stealing the show, but they are adding something to it by moving, by kind of, creating this extra piece of it that makes it more of a show.
Adding to the entertainment value.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. So, I always say, you just want to be a backup dancer to your dog. That's the pop star, basically.
Right. And something I do a lot of is I have some advanced throws and things like that, and I try to do some sort of motion with the disc or something before I do my throws. Not every single throw, but a lot of them. And you'll see that in my routine, that whenever I go to do like a long throw, I might have both hands involved with the disc, do something where I transfer the disc from one hand to another. Some people throw the disc up right before they throw it, or they do a little twiddle thingy, with their hands.
Mhm.
I don't even know what all those things can be called. But
There's
just
a bunch of those.
but
too.
that adds to it too. Even though your legs aren't moving a whole lot, you're doing things with your arm. You can, you're getting ready to do like your finishing move or something like that. You're raising your hands to the judges and the audience. Say, hey, here it is. This is the final one. 2 seconds left. Boom! You do your big trick or whatever. Those are things that are similar. Not even running around, but you are.
What do you think? What am I most well known for?
Your showmanship.
Can you do it?
Can you do the move? Oh, your spin with the catch?
Well, that's one of them. And the other one is the fist bump. So those are the two that most people pick on me for, is my constant spinning and the fist bump. I'm not doing that one quite as much because it was getting a little excessive. But those things all kind of go into the presentation piece and the showmanship factor. Mm-hmm. And they, like you said, add to the entertainment value. So all of that stuff, anything that makes it more of a show, more pleasing to watch, more professional, I think is a great way to put it. It adds professionalism to the routine. Those are all great key pieces just outside of the throwing that you can do as the handler. And I don't want to touch too much on difficulty, because I think that is just its whole episode in itself. But, different types of difficulty, there's different things like timing and throw difficulty. So those two things combined, some tricks are difficult because the timing is difficult. Maybe the throw's not so difficult, but the timing's difficult, or vice versa. The throw's really difficult, but the timing's easy. Or sometimes you have these crazy people that decide, well, I'm going to do a throw with crazy timing, and then really, kind of blow everybody's socks off. So that's also something to consider too, is the difficulty. But I think difficulty is one of those things that's hard to judge, because there is kind of bias from the judge side. And I try not to think of things in terms of difficulty as a judge, because in my opinion, like just as an example, I think a forehand throw is way more difficult than an overhand. And I think you're opposite, right?
No, I think the forehand throw is the most difficult throw.
Okay, well, we had a difference though. There was something that we had
so much that it's my best throw.
Okay,
because I worked on it so much, because it was so difficult. I thought, I want to perfect this, or at least try to.
Gotcha. There was some other throw. We had this conversation a long time ago, but we were talking about two throws, and like, that's way more difficult. You're like, no, this is way more difficult. And sure. I don't remember what the throws were now.
We both agree that Staker's super easy.
Yeah, we both agree Staker's super easy. But I think like some throws, Staker is generally really easy. But I think depending on who you are, like what certain throws you struggle with, because everybody kind of has naturally different things they're good at. your definition of difficult could be different. I
Yes.
tend to find vault throws extremely difficult for me to do. However, like a dog catch throw is much easier for the most part. So, that's also something to think about as somebody that's judging. You don't want to let your bias overtake, just because it was a throw that was easy for you doesn't mean it's an easy throw.
And for me, when I'm judging, I guess what I'm looking for more is just how cool is it? Even if it's not necessarily a difficult throw. I remember Al Erickson did this little thing where he kind of did a spin. I still don't even know what he did, but he did this spin and he rotated and did all these things. And then the disc would pop out. It was just a backhand throw. And I would be able to see it was just a backhand throw. But I would give him more credit on that when I'm judging him than any of his other throws, just because it looked so cool to me. And I couldn't figure out what he was doing. I wasn't sure what he was doing, but man, I just loved it. And it's just very, very nice. So I think that's the most important thing is as long as it's pleasing to the eyes and it's cool, that's what I'm looking for primarily.
That stuff stands out. Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
For sure.
Or if you have if you just have you're doing an overhand or something and you throw it 35 yards, that's very impressive also.
Yeah,
everybody would agree with that.
Yeah.
Doing a difficult throw very far and thrown perfectly. Wow.
Yeah.
Or if the grass is high and you skip the disc. I've seen Chuck Middleton do that a few times. I'm like, I'm not skipping on this, and he goes out there and he does it. And I'm like, hey,
he won't skip on anything.
Yes, he doesn't care. Doesn't always work, but hey, at least he tries. But no, he's very good.
Most of the time it works.
Yes, it does.
He's pretty darn good at it. He's one of the best as far as consistency with the skips.
No,
but
no question.
Yeah, I get scared and I'm like, the grass is
me too. Like, yeah, it's got to be just right for me, and I'm like, okay, I'll skip.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I think we could turn the whole episode into just a human judging episode, but I think that's not what we were going for here. So
the most important part.
That means we've got to move on to the next category.
Which is the most important.
Are we thinking of the same category?
I was thinking. Well, it's break time, and Kirby has something she needs to tell you.
Dude, you guys, I stole all of his good training skills, tips, and tricks, and I posted them to my online course website. Go to flyingcanines.com to check them all out. Don't let him know I took it all, and I'm giving it to you at a good price. Go check it out. That means we've got to move on to the next category.
Which is the most important.
Are we thinking of the same category?
I was thinking dog category.
Okay, I was thinking dog category too. Yeah, so that's good. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Because we're here for the dogs.
Absolutely.
So this is the most important category.
This is the most important category because the dogs are just fun to watch. I mean, that's why we're watching it. Because if we wanted to just watch humans do it, we could go watch a human freestyle event without dogs. So.
Exactly.
So I agree. Yes.
So what do you look for in the dog when you're judging?
Man, see, the dog is really interesting because I think, dogs all have their own different styles and different strengths, and there's different strategies. And one of the most complicated parts about judging the dog is it's based so much on how the human does and what does the human show about the dog's skills, because you're not going to have all the skills in the world, but the judge is never going to know it if you as the handler don't show those skills and pieces. So that's always the troublesome part for me when I'm judging the dog. But as far as like the main things that I look for, it's a pretty standard, drive of the dog, the speed, the, jumping and control. And I think athleticism is one of these things that can be kind of subjective depending on who's judging and what they're looking for and what their expectations are and maybe what their dog has done. I mean, I know I probably have a small bias towards jumping dogs that I'm not very impressed by just the leaping ability, because I have some pretty athletic dogs. I see it all the time. I mean, I saw Torch jump, 4 feet in the air.
Every single throw,
Every single throw. So, I'm not as shocked by it as somebody that maybe has a dog that doesn't jump at all, or, their past dogs never jump. They might be like, whoa, that's really incredible. I could never get my dog to jump like that. So they're really impressed by it. So, I think, the dog category, and that's always been one of my gripes with the dog category, is I think that some judges tend to put a little too much emphasis on the actual height of the jump and not the control of the jump and all of the other categories that the dog has to offer. Their speed, their intensity on the disc, the drive. And I'm not just talking they go after the disc. I mean, their laser eyes on the disc. That's all they're thinking about. When they catch the disc, they don't look around and think, who's watching? They turn around and get back to the handler.
Right. And one more thing that I think is very interesting when we're talking about the dog category is I had a judge one time tell me that their number one thing that they were looking for is how fast the dog comes back to you.
Yeah. And I think I know who you're talking about, which is so funny.
And it's just that this category, like you said, I think there's more variation in this than anything. In any of the categories, and what the judge is looking for.
Agree, because people are so specific on the dogs that they're looking for. And I think even when you just think about people in general looking for their next Frisbee dog, there's so many different options that people look for and reasoning for why they like this dog or that dog. And there's so many different pros and cons to all these different dogs and people's perspectives on the dogs that it makes it like super wide open. Whereas like that combined with how much the handler plays into the dog category makes it incredibly all over the place.
Right. Yeah. So I've had judges say their number one thing is speed that they're looking for. They want a fast dog, look for jumping. My number one is catching. I want to see a dog that catches very, very consistently and confidently. And maybe, like you said, like whenever maybe they really chomp down whenever they catch, because it is a big difference between a dog that just has a soft mouth and
it's almost about to fall out of their mouth.
Pop out of their mouth, and when they're coming back, it's falling out of their mouth. Versus a dog that goes and when they catch it, you hear it.
They're not messing around.
The judges hear a snap. And then they come back and the disc is bent in half, like bent. You can see it bent. When I see that, that's always looking better to me,
Like the dog's really into it. I think it's so funny. Some of the dogs that catch it, they shake their head after.
Oh, yes.
That always cracks me up.
Especially a little growl.
Oh, yeah. And most of the time it's a little terrier or something.
Yes.
That's so cute. It's like a little cute dog. And then they do that and they look wild.
I've seen it with a lot of mini Aussies also.
Oh, yeah. They do that too, which they're usually small and cute. So they're like shaking it. It's too funny. But I think the dog category is like, I feel like one of the most misunderstood, and it's like in some ways the easiest and the most difficult to judge.
Yes.
Because like inherently it should be easy. Like dog plays good, they catch good, they like they show all these things, but then it's so dependent on the handler, because how many times have you been judging, you're like, oh man, I want to give this dog a 9, but gosh, the person threw like half the disc on the ground, didn't even give a dog the chance. You can't give the dog a 9, even though the dog played no part in doing anything wrong,
Absolutely.
So, it's definitely difficult. I think another thing that I tend to like to see is if a dog can do different kinds of things, not the same types of elements over and over. Now, granted, if you have a dog that's really specific in they're very, very good in just a few types of elements, then yes, you want to focus on those elements because you want to show the best parts of the dog, and you want to kind of hide showing the things that they're not very good at. However, I'm always really impressed when I see a dog that can kind of do everything, and you're like, oh, wow, is there anything this dog can't do? So that's in USDDN scoring. This is kind of part of the team elements, but it plays a big part into dog too, is that they want you to show these specific elements. And while if I'm not judging USDDN, I'm not looking specifically for those elements, like a checkbox type of thing. But I do like seeing, oh, wow, look at this dog can do a dog catch. They could do vaults. They could do different kinds of vaults. They could do a reverse vault. They can do a standard straight across vault. They can do an over. They could do flips. They could
catch the different kinds of spin both.
Yeah.
Upside down, possibly a butterfly, things like that. I had a judge once say that he likes to see something like a butterfly because the dog needs to have a lot of patience for it, because they can't just be running around like crazy, not paying any attention at all, really. But you can do other tricks and do that running around kind of stuff, but you can't do a butterfly. You really can't.
Yeah,
the dog really needs to pay attention. Typically, they need to stop, but people do it with vaults, and even when the dog's running. Yeah, of course. But
I mean, Eva does them in flow. Eva Gutierrez in our club, she is like the pro at doing the running butterflies.
Right.
Like, it's like, wow.
So and the judge also said something like an airbrush would be similar because they're not going really fast. It's a slow.
Well, you typically don't throw those very
You
far.
can't
They're
go
not
very
that
far,
long.
or a kick brush or something like that, or probably a chest roll and a chest mac. All those kinds of things would be in that category. And if you don't do any of those, then he is very upset because he wants to see something where you show the dog can have control and that they have to do something very difficult, which those throws are very difficult for the human to do them properly. Even the butterfly, those are not easy to do. So it's a dog can catch it, and then the dog has to have that patience and focus to be able to catch.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's kind of part of the, showing the dog is that showing, hey, they can catch a really hard trick throw or a throw that they don't see very well, or they're coming at a different angle towards the throw, or, there's infinite ways to show this, right? And infinite amount of tricks to show. And of course, I always have said, from the player side, you want to show your best pieces of your dog. So find the best things that you can put into 2 minutes. But, when you're judging, the more stuff that you have that's really good and unique in those 2 minutes, it makes the routine look much better. There's more variation to it on the dog trick side.
Of course.
They're able to catch trick throws. They're able to catch medium distance throws. They're able to catch long throws. They're able to, catch all different types of throws.
Right. And as I've said many times to people, you don't need to have an over. You don't need to have a dog catch. You don't need to have vaults. But when you do them, you show that you can do them, and you show that your dog can do them, and it's adding something to your routine. No matter what it is, you're adding something different, a skip or an air bounce or a long throw or a short throw or anything like that. You're adding things to your routine. But at the end of the day, the number one thing I tell people is do what you are best at doing and what your dog's best at doing.
I agree.
And at the end of the day, your score will reflect that. I would say that for the most part, as long as what you're doing it at a high level, you're going to get scored well for it. Then the flip side is you want to have variation. You want to see different things.
For sure.
So it's always a sort of like a tug of war type of thing with what do you do and what you don't do.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit about this. My experience with Sketch. So Sketch wasn't really a quote unquote real disc dog until 2 years old. We were playing with a floppy disk with him up until that point. And of course, we joined Frisbee Classic. I found out about the whole world of freestyle that we didn't even know existed. So, from his puppyhood, we were always telling him to stay off of us. It was like, okay, don't jump on us, general pet dog things that, I didn't know that I was going to want him to launch off my back, several years later. I didn't even think of that. So, Sketch really had trouble learning to vault, and I didn't really know the best foundations to teach him. So long story short, Sketch ended up not being great at vaults for many reasons. And, it was always kind of pushed in the beginning. I felt like when I started, you have to have vaults, vaults are the end all be all. That's the thing to have, So I was like, okay, I got to get him to vault. And so we would do vaults, and sure, some of them would come out fine. And some of them he'd catch, and occasionally he'd look awesome. And then sometimes he'd look squirrely. It was just very inconsistent, but most of the time they weren't great. Sketch wasn't the best vaulting dog. He wasn't the highest jumping dog. Sketch's skill set was really centered around his speed, his catching, his ability to slow down and collect, and his ability to speed up and catch throws that required him to speed up and catch those. It wasn't really vaulting. It wasn't like big jumping and overs, and it took him a very long time to even want to do a dog catch because he's like, I'm not supposed to jump on you. So for a long time I struggled with Sketch to get higher scores with him because I'm doing everything. I'm trying to have the most variation in the routine, do all those things. And it wasn't until he had the iliopsoas injury that he had like several months off. I think it was like 4 or 5 months off. And then when I was bringing him back into playing, it was right around the time of the finals. And so I said, okay, I'm going to play with him because he was good to go, but I didn't want to just jump right back into all of, everything we were doing, because it's kind of a lot. And as anybody that's had a dog with an injury knows, you don't just jump back 100% into what you were doing. You want to kind of ease them back in. So I said, okay, the rest of this season, I'm just going to play without vaults or without any jumping or anything like that, and just focus on, allowing him to play and really kind of lower my expectations on what's going to happen. Well, I'll tell you what happened. He caught everything. He looked awesome. And we got scored higher than we've ever been scored before in all different organizations. So this was not organization specific. This was everywhere. So that kind of really opened my eyes to, wow, maybe I should just keep going with this instead of trying to include all this stuff that he wasn't really great at to begin with. So that's kind of how I ended up figuring out with sketch. Unfortunately, it kind of took in, him having that injury, which, by the way, was not related to disc. It was playing with the chuck it ball in wet grass. So don't do that. Rookie mistake. I learned, don't play with the chuck it ball on wet grass or do high speed things on wet grass. But anyway, besides the point. But that's kind of how I discovered with him to really focus on, the things that your dog is good at.
Yeah, and I guess something that I'd like to point out is I sometimes see what I call kitchen sink routine, and that is somebody that's throwing everything but the kitchen sink into their routine, but they're forcing it. It's like a round peg square hole or whatever. They're trying to force it into their routine to have one of everything. I want one throw like this, one throw like that, one of these, one dog catch, one vault, one this, I could just tell, and they're not doing any one of them particularly great. They're just doing them so that they have them all in their routine. And I would recommend not going that route. I would say find what you have a passion for, what you enjoy doing. Me, for example, my main thing is I like throwing. So I try to put as many cool throws, difficult throws in my routine as I can. That's what I like to do. I also love dog catches. I just don't tend to do a ton of them, but that's probably my second favorite thing is dog catches. I usually try to put 2 in my routine or something like that. So definitely do what you enjoy. Don't do
and
something.
Your dog. It may be dog specific. That's
Absolutely.
a really important piece too, because my routine with sketch and my routine with torch were pretty polar opposites.
Right. Yeah. When I'm saying do what you enjoy or what you're good at doing, your team.
Yes.
That's what I'm always referring to. But that's a good correction.
Just making sure, because
yes.
If you don't know, a lot of times we have a lot of context on what we're saying because we've talked about this stuff and kind of beat the dead horse to ourselves a million times and talked all this stuff over. So we know what each other's saying, but sometimes we just want to make sure that the audience and the listeners also understand. So, and I know you're checking me too to make sure I'm explaining things as I should. But I think that kind of sums up the dog category.
Yep.
Another thing that I didn't mention as far as like athleticism that I wanted to add is, the different forms of athleticism and the focus of the dog. You also have to consider things that maybe it's beyond jumping and speed, but like the ability for the dog to catch discs rapidly. Mm-hmm. That's something that not all dogs can do. That's a great piece to show if your dog can do it. Or if they can't do that, find good ways to hide it, like having, sort of a team movement setup moves. Like, sometimes if a dog's really slow at multiples, I might do something where I toss a disc and we spin together, toss a disc, spin together, or something like that, adding something in so it just looks planned, but I'm kind of hiding the fact that it takes my dog forever to drop. But, as far as athleticism goes, like something that I think gets overlooked a lot is like balance. So like dogs that are doing foot stalls or standing on their hind legs, those are other pieces of athleticism that I think are not always looked at, but should be. They're definitely valuable, and it shows off a different piece of the dog's athleticism.
Yes, I'd say also being able to drop a disc at distance and go for another one.
Yeah, that's a great skill. Not all dogs have it.
It's a very difficult one for the handler too, to be able to throw it properly.
Okay, and I know we got to wrap up the dog, but one more piece is kind of the training piece. So also consider these things even just beyond athleticism, like we kind of explained about the handoff. Those are trained things. The dropping at a distance. It's, all things that are trained, and it's not necessarily an athleticism skill, but it's more of a trained skill. So those are all pieces of the dog that,
Right.
as judges, you want to consider. So I think we'll we'll end dog on that. But of course, when we combine these two things, you can't have a team without the handler and the dog. So that's obviously kind of the next category.
So we got a bit of a problem.
We talk too much.
Yeah. So guess what?
You've got another episode on this topic to watch in the next episode.
Part 2.
So go on over to part 2 if you want to see the rest of this episode.
See ya.